When life gets hard and challenges keep coming, what truly builds success? Is it natural talent that sets some apart, the consistent discipline of hard work, or the everyday failures and lessons that quietly shape regular people into stronger, smarter, and more resilient versions of themselves? The foreclosure notice was taped to our front door when I got home from my third job interview rejection that week. I stood there at 17, holding my little sister's hand, reading the legal document that meant we'd be homeless in 30 days. Mom was inside, probably passed out on the couch again, lost in another bottle of cheap wine that she claimed helped her cope with life. "What does it say, Alex?" my sister Lily asked, tugging on my sleeve. "It says we need to find a new place to live," I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. What I didn't tell her was that with Mom's drinking getting worse and my complete lack of job prospects, I had no idea where that place would be. My best friend Trevor lived 3 blocks away in a house his lawyer father had bought him for his 18th birthday. Trevor was everything I wasn't. Naturally charismatic, effortlessly smart, destined for success. He'd gotten into Stanford early admission without breaking a sweat while I was getting rejection letters from community colleges. That night, I walked to Trevor's house and found him playing video games in his bedroom that was bigger than our entire living room. "Dude, you look terrible," he said, not bothering to pause his game. I told him about the foreclosure, about Mom's drinking, about not being able to find even a minimum wage job. Trevor finally paused the game and turned to face me. "That sucks, man. But hey, at least you don't have the pressure I have. My dad expects me to get a 4.0 at Stanford and eventually take over his law firm. You get to figure life out without all these expectations." I stared at him, realizing he genuinely thought my problems were easier than his privileged pressures. "Right," I said quietly. "Lucky me." Walking home, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be the victim of my circumstances anymore. The next morning, I started what I called Operation Survival. If talent and connections weren't available to me, I'd have to build something else. I walked into every business within a 5-mile radius of our house, restaurants, gas stations, grocery stores, auto shops, and asked for work. Not just filled out applications online like I'd been doing, but looked managers in the eye and asked for opportunities. At Murphy's Auto Repair, the owner Bill Murphy looked at my application and frowned. "Says here you don't have any automotive experience." "No, sir, but I'm willing to learn whatever you need me to know. I show up on time, I work hard, and I don't quit when things get difficult." Bill studied me for a moment. "Most kids your age can't change a tire. You even know what a wrench looks like?" "I know what it looks like, but I can't tell you much about using one. But if you teach me, I guarantee I'll work harder than anyone you've ever hired." Something in my desperation must have been convincing because Bill hired me as a shop helper for $8 an hour. For the next 6 months, I learned everything I could about cars. Not because I was naturally mechanically gifted, I definitely wasn't, but because every skill I acquired meant more job security and potentially higher wages. Bill started noticing my determination. "Alex, most kids I hire want to learn the easy stuff. Oil changes, tire rotations. You're over here asking me to explain engine diagnostics and transmission repair, because someday I might need to know those things," I said. What I didn't tell Bill was that every night I went home and researched automotive repair online, using the library's free internet. I watched YouTube videos, read forums, and studied repair manuals until my eyes burned. Meanwhile, Trevor was posting Instagram photos from Stanford parties and spring break trips to Cabo. His life looked effortless and perfect. By winter, I was earning $12 an hour and had convinced Bill to let me work overtime. Between my job at the shop and weekend shifts at a diner, I was bringing home enough money to pay the mortgage and keep us afloat. But Mom's drinking was getting worse, and Lily was starting to struggle in school. The stress of being the family's financial support at 17 was overwhelming. One particularly bad night, I found Mom passed out on the bathroom floor with an empty bottle beside her. Lily was crying in her room, hungry because there wasn't any food in the house. I got Mom into bed, made Lily a sandwich from the last bit of bread and peanut butter we had, and sat on our front steps wondering if I was strong enough to hold everything together. That's when Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor, came over with a plate of leftovers. "Alex, I've been watching you take care of your family for months. That's not something most kids your age could handle." "I don't feel like I'm handling it," I admitted. "I feel like I'm drowning." Mrs. Patterson sat down next to me. "Can I tell you something? I raised 3 kids as a single mom after my husband left. There were nights I didn't think we'd make it. But you know what I learned? The people who succeed long-term aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who learn to get stronger through struggling. How do you get stronger when everything keeps falling apart? You're already doing it, Alex. You're learning skills, taking responsibility, solving problems every day that most adults never have to face. That's not punishment. That's training." Her words stayed with me, but I wasn't sure I believed them yet. The breakthrough came 6 months later, when Bill announced he was expanding the shop and needed an assistant manager. "The job requires someone who understands both the mechanical side and the business side," he said. "It's more responsibility, more hours, but it pays $18 an hour with benefits." 3 other mechanics applied, all with more experience than me, but Bill chose me. "Why?" I asked him after he offered me the position. "Because when I give you a problem, you don't just fix it. You figure out how to prevent it from happening again. When customers are difficult, you find ways to communicate that work. When we're short-staffed, you figure out how to be more efficient instead of just complaining. Those don't seem like special skills. Alex, you'd be surprised how rare they are. Most people people with natural talent never develop problem-solving skills because they don't need them early on. You've been forced to develop them, and now they're like muscle memory. Around the same time, I started taking community college classes at night. Not because I was naturally academic, school had always been a struggle, but because I'd learned that consistent effort could overcome initial difficulty. My first semester, I nearly failed calculus. Instead of dropping the class, I formed a study group with other struggling students, went to every office hour, and treated math like I'd treated learning auto repair, as a skill that could be developed through persistence. By the end of the semester, I'd pulled my grade up to a B. More importantly, I'd learned something about my own capacity to master difficult material. Trevor, meanwhile, was struggling at Stanford. His natural intelligence had always been enough in high school, but college-level work required study habits and resilience he'd never had to develop. "I'm thinking about taking a gap year," he told me when he came home for Christmas. "Stanford is way harder than I expected. These classes are impossible." "What's impossible about them?" I asked. "The workload is insane. Some of these professors expect you to spend 20 hours a week on their class alone." I thought about my schedule: 40 hours at the shop, 12 hours of community college classes, plus studying and taking care of Lily and Mom. "Maybe impossible is just unfamiliar," I suggested. Trevor looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. In a way, I was speaking fluent struggle, while he was still learning the basics. 2 years later, everything had shifted. I'd been promoted again at the shop and was managing a team of 5 mechanics. My community college GPA was 3.7, and I'd been accepted to State University's business program with a partial scholarship. Most importantly, I'd saved enough money to move Mom into a treatment program and Lily into a stable living situation with my aunt. Trevor had switched majors 3 times and was on academic probation. Not because he lacked intelligence, but because he'd never learned to persist through difficulty. The moment that crystallized everything happened during my junior year of college. I was taking a business strategy course where we had to analyze failing companies and propose solutions. Our professor assigned teams randomly. I ended up with 3 students who'd all gone to private prep schools and had business owner parents. Initially, they clearly saw me as the weak link. "Alex probably doesn't understand corporate restructuring concepts," one of them said during our first meeting. "Maybe he should just handle the PowerPoint formatting." The company we were analyzing was a chain of auto repair shops that was losing customers to larger competitors. While my teammates focused on financial models and marketing theories, I approached the problem differently. I'd worked in auto repair for 5 years. I knew why customers chose certain shops and why they left. I understood the operational inefficiencies that academic models couldn't capture. "The real problem isn't their pricing or marketing," I told the group. "It's that they've lost the personal relationships that made customers loyal. They're trying to compete on scale, but their advantage was always trust and expertise." My teammates were skeptical until I laid out a detailed plan based on what I'd learned at Murphy's shop: how to build customer relationships, retain skilled mechanics, and create operational systems that prioritized quality over volume. When we presented to the class, our professor was impressed not with our financial projection, but with the practical insights that could only come from real-world experience. "This is the kind of strategic thinking that comes from understanding problems from the ground up," she said after our presentation. After class, my teammates approached me with something close to respect. "How did you know all that stuff about customer retention and employee management?" one asked. "I learned it by doing it," I said, "by making mistakes and figuring out better ways." That project led to an internship at a business consulting firm that specialized in helping struggling small businesses. Not because I was the smartest candidate, but because I could understand problems from the perspective of people who were fighting to survive. My first client was a family restaurant that was 3 months behind on rent. The owner, Maria Santos, reminded me of my mom in many ways: overwhelmed, scared, but still fighting. "I don't understand what's going wrong," Maria told me during our first meeting. "We work 18 hours a day, but we're still losing money." I spent a week observing their operations, not as a business school student trying to apply theories, but as someone who understood what it meant to struggle financially. The problems were obvious once I looked: inefficient inventory management, no cost controls, pricing that didn't account for actual expenses. But more than that, Maria and her husband were trying to do everything themselves instead of building systems. "You're working 18 hours a day because you're doing work that could be systemized or delegated," I explained. "Not because there's 18 hours of necessary work." Over 3 months, we restructured their operation, implemented basic financial controls, and created processes that allowed them to work more efficiently. The restaurant went from losing $2,000 a month to making a $1,500 profit. But more importantly, Maria and her family had their lives back. "Alex," Maria said during our final meeting, "you didn't just save our business. You understood what we were going through because you've been through it yourself." That's when I realized what Mrs. Patterson had meant about struggles being training. My experience managing financial crisis had taught me to identify the root causes of business problems that textbook learning couldn't reveal. My years of working multiple jobs had shown me how to optimize time and energy in ways that naturally gifted people often never learned. Word spread about the restaurant turnaround. Within 6 months, I had more consulting requests than I could handle, all from small business owners who needed someone who understood their reality. After graduation, instead Instead of taking a corporate job, I started my own consulting firm, specializing in helping family businesses and startups survive difficult periods. The business grew rapidly, not because I was naturally gifted at entrepreneurship, but because I'd spent years developing exactly the skills that crisis situations required: resourcefulness, persistence, creative problem solving, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. 5 years later, I was featured in Entrepreneur magazine as one of 30 under 30 business consultants to watch. The article highlighted my unconventional background and approach. Unlike consultants who learned business theory in classrooms, the journalist wrote, Alex Rodriguez learned business survival in real life. His clients say he doesn't just understand their problems intellectually, he's lived them. Trevor reached out after seeing the article. He'd finally graduated from Stanford, but was struggling to find direction in his career. I keep applying for jobs that seem perfect for me on paper, he said, but I'm not getting offered. Everyone wants experience I don't have. What kind of experience? I asked. Experience handling pressure, dealing with uncertainty, solving problems without clear answers. Basically, everything you learned when we were 17 and I was playing video games. Looking back, I could see the pattern. While Trevor had been developing his natural talents in comfortable environments, I'd been forced to develop capabilities that only come from navigating genuine difficulty. It's not too late to learn those things, I told him, but it starts with putting yourself in situations that challenge you rather than avoiding them. Today, my consulting firm works with over 200 small businesses across 3 states. We specialize in helping companies survive and thrive during difficult periods, economic downturns, market disruptions, family crises. But the insight that drives everything I do came from those early years of struggle. Success isn't about avoiding hardship or having natural advantages. It's about developing the capability to extract value from whatever challenges life presents. When young entrepreneurs ask me for advice, I tell them something that would have confused me at 17 but makes perfect sense now. Don't hope for an easy path. Hope for the strength to handle a difficult one. The capabilities you develop navigating real problems will serve you better than any natural talent or inherited advantage. The foreclosure notice that seemed like the end of everything was actually the beginning of everything that mattered. It forced me to develop resilience, resourcefulness, and problem-solving skills that became the foundation of my career. Mom is 3 years sober now and works as a counselor helping other people in recovery. Lily is in college studying social work, inspired by watching how helping others in crisis became my life's work. And Mrs. Patterson was right. The struggles weren't punishment. They were preparation for exactly the work I was meant to do. Sometimes the hardest times in our lives are actually the most educational. Not because suffering itself is valuable, but because the capabilities we develop responding to genuine challenges become the tools we use to build everything meaningful that comes after. The validation of this philosophy came in an unexpected way 3 years ago when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and devastated small businesses across the country. While many consulting firms struggled to help clients navigate unprecedented uncertainty, our firm's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Business owners who were facing their first real crisis wanted guidance from someone who understood what it felt like when everything fell apart. Alex, said Janet Morrison, who owned a boutique hotel that had lost 80% of its bookings, I've worked with consultants before, but they always seem to be giving advice from textbooks. You're giving advice from experience. During those 18 months, we helped 89 businesses avoid closure by applying the same principles I'd learned at 17. Identify what you can control, maximize efficiency with limited resources, and find creative solutions when traditional approaches don't work. But the most meaningful case was Roberto's family restaurant in downtown Phoenix. When lockdowns hit, Roberto was 3 weeks from bankruptcy, just like his family had been 20 years earlier when I first helped them. We survived the first crisis because of you, Roberto told me over a video call, tears in his eyes. Now we need your help again. This time, the solution involved pivoting to delivery and takeout, partnering with local grocery stores to sell their signature sauces, and creating virtual cooking classes that maintained customer connection during isolation. 6 months later, Roberto's restaurant was not only surviving, but thriving with 3 new revenue streams they'd never considered before the pandemic. The crisis forced us to innovate in ways we never would have during good times, Roberto reflected. Just like you always said, sometimes the worst situations teach you the most valuable lessons. These pandemic successes led to recognition I'd never expected. The Small Business Administration invited me to lead a national task force on crisis recovery, and Harvard Business School asked me to develop a curriculum on resilience-based business strategy. Standing in that Harvard lecture hall, teaching MBA students about turning adversity into advantage, I thought about 17-year-old me reading that foreclosure notice. That scared kid could never have imagined that his family's crisis would eventually qualify him to teach some of the country's brightest business minds about survival and adaptation. The question isn't whether you'll face challenges, I told those Harvard students. The question is whether you'll let those challenges teach you something that success alone never could. After my lecture, a student approached me, clearly from a privileged background, struggling with the uncertainty of graduating during economic turmoil. Professor Rodriguez, I've never faced real hardship. How do I develop resilience without going through actual crisis? Start by putting yourself in situations that challenge you in smaller simpler ways, I suggested. Volunteer with organizations serving people in crisis. Take on projects where failure is possible. Learn to be comfortable with discomfort before life forces discomfort on you. That conversation inspired the creation of our Challenge Leadership program, where business students spend summers working with struggling small businesses, learning resilience not through simulation, but through real-world application. The program has become one of the most sought-after experiences at the business school, with students discovering that their most valuable education happens when they're forced to solve problems they never learned about in classrooms.